It is. What is it? It is 10:37 p.m. March 11th. Um, Hopefully I can make this a short one today. The first thing I want to, or the major thing I want to talk about was I've been I usually have this thing where I cycle through the office and community a lot, but I've done that so much for so many years. I've kind of got tired of the office and community, so I had to take a break. So I've been kind of branching out into other TV shows. Um, I enjoyed what was it called? The vampire one. Fuck, what was it called? I know the Japanese name. It's called Vampire Shared House, which makes a lot of sense. Um, what We Do in the Shadows. Oh my god, What We Do in the Shadows. Great series, but the last season was too preachy. It lost, a bit of integrity. Well, what? Yeah, and then I watched something else recently. Oh no, I tried to watch Parks and Rec. Oh yeah, and then there was only one episode free. For some reason, Parks and Rec is very hard to find on certain platforms. Um, but before that, I was watching Arrested Development. I love Arrested Development. It's great. It's so well written. It's formulaic, but it's the way that the humor is structured is formulaic, but it still works, which is really weird because most formulaic things don't work. It loses integrity, but it uses formula to its what's the wording? It uses formula to its strength, I would say. I really like that. I really like to play with double meaning. I've been like trying to explore with double meaning a bit more with my jokes. But yeah, and I finally came after I watched Arrested Development. I tried to watch Parks and Rec and it didn't work, and I was like kind of struggling because I really want to watch binge something, like I need that comfort. But it's still too early to watch The Office again or Community. I really need to take a break from that. And then I realized that, and I know like Modern Family is kind of popular, but it doesn't really hit me as well. Modern Family just I can watch it, but it doesn't strike me enough. Although I like the clips on YouTube, but the whole series, I don't know, it just something's missing from that show. But I came across Mythic Quest, and I like Danny Pudi, so I thought I would give it a try. Um, and I really enjoyed the first season. I just binged the whole show today, um, instead of working on my thesis and studying for exams for next week. So it is a good show. I mean, that wasn't really good. Fuck. That wasn't a really good justification because it implies I'm just procrastinating, which is true. But independently of that, I was still motivated to keep watching because I found the show interesting. Um, yeah, Mythic Quest. It's very interesting, very fun show. Um, the premise works well, you know, bringing something new into the sitcom, you know, setting, I guess, framework into more contemporary, you know, culture. I really like that. It's very relatable in that sense. I think the characters are interesting. Well, what I found a bit, you know, not that good about that show is the names. So many names are really forgetful, except for Poppy and Ian. I thought that was interesting. Um, Naming Ian instead of Ian. But it took me a bit to realize, like, they're saying Ian, because Ian's a rare way of saying Ian. And then Ian Grim, it sounds like I'm Grim, which is a interesting wordplay, but I don't know if they're really taking it really slow, but I'm not seeing enough of what the grimness behind Iron. But yeah, and then CW's death, it was like, oh, really? Well, yeah. I thought the actor actually died, so they did that or something, but the actor was still alive, so, yeah. But what really pulled me into the show, well, I was like, I would say I would give this like a 6.5 or 7, yeah, maybe a 7. Um, is It's 3/4 a sitcom and 1/4 there's like a proper linear narrative of sorts, but not in like the Office way, in the sense that they use backstory for character development or even world building of that sitcom universe, which is an interesting way of doing sitcom. I thought was interesting. The third episode was I thought it was a very interesting narrative choice for a sitcom where they do a backstory, but it's not a backstory. It's backstory of the myth Mythic Quest like universe. It makes it sound epic, like Marvel universe, but it's in the story world, in the same location. The point is like the story's about these two dorky couples who are into video games in like the 70s or 80s. And they became a couple and they built their own gaming company or something, and then things fall apart. They get too, you know, focused on the capital, and they lose the quality of the soul the original game had. And at one point, the couples, you know, break up and everything. It's kind of a tragic, but it ends in a bittersweet where the couple meets at the end, and um, I sorry, I don't. If you're watching this, I don't give a shit about spoiler warning, because um, as much as I'm putting this out on the internet, this is more of I'm just putting it out for an illusion to have an audience. So I don't really care if there is an audience actually that gets ruined. But I mean, but then I it well, what I do here is very paradoxical, convoluted, but just something I do. Um. Anyways, my point was, what was my point? And then it's bittersweet. Like the couple meets up after their divorce, and the guy finds out like the woman got remarried and had children, but they have like a nice interaction. And the guy's like, I'm sorry, you were right, because he was the one that fell into that, the capital, the money scheme that ruined the game. God, this fucking mosquito. And it goes away again. And then at the end, he's like, I'm sorry, I ruined the game, you were right. And it's like, and they have a nice game, a nice conversation. They're like, hey, we can, you can always make a new game, because the games here are shit or whatever, because they're at the game store. And it was like a nice callback to them when they first met. And it's like, and they call each other their, like their nickname or whatever. But then, what I really like is those characters never come up in the show again. But what comes up are some of the merches related to their video game. Like they wear the shirt of the game they produce, or this like little furball character that's apparently, the whole idea was like the video game was bought, or I think the movie adaptation was produced by Disney, and they added this furball character that didn't match the soul of the spirit of the game at all, because the spirit of the game was, the game was called Deep, no, Dark Quiet Death, I think. So it's a very grim, morbid video game about inevitability of like death and whatever. But then they added this like action movie with this furball character. But then in the modern day, the furball character is like a lovable, loved creature that's like on different set pieces in the background. And they also mention it at one point, like it's a classic or whatever. It's an interesting way of it's not. It's this. Well, what I recognize in this show is they take a very good centralist approach to certain values that I resig, res, resonate, God, resonate with. I really like. It's not like right wing bigotry, but it's not left wing left wing narcissism, self importance. It does a good middle where it respects, um, it upholds feminist values, and um, like it's pro LGBT, and it points out issues with the gaming industry and all that. But at the same time, there's an episode where like this it doesn't make it clear what her well, she's gay, but I don't know if she's they them or she her. But anyways, this gay character, I guess no, she is a she. Yeah. She's called out. No, she points out all the time where women are, especially gay women, are less given a lot less opportunity and stuff, and they never feel heard. But then in this scene, she's literally driving the car with her boss right next to him, and then he's like, I don't care about your relationship. I want to know about your ambition or whatever, because the whole thing is she never gets heard. But this is the opportunity. Tell me, give me a pitch or whatever the boss says. And then she doesn't have any idea. She doesn't have any pitch. So it's true. Her voice is less heard, but then she has been blaming everything on that, so she never pushed as well. In that sense, it's talking about I see this as a commentary also on like blaming everything on the white male hegemony, 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 or the patriarchy or whatever. It's true that like norm has been suppressive, and that is a major factor, but everything is multifaceted, right? You can't just blame everything on one thing. There's always going to be a lot of things. I thought that was an interesting thing to put out there, but I have digressed like crazy because the point I wanted to go back to with um, the what? The backstory of like this old video game company is that when the couple first bought this like building, they carved their name onto this pillar to commemorate their relationship, but also the start to their video game company. And then it cuts back. It's several episodes later actually, where you get the payoff of that, or you kind of get the payoff at the end of that backstory episode because you see this carving when you flash forward back to the modern day, where the carving is there in this new Mythic Quest development, company building, because it's the same building interior, a building that Mythic Quest is making their video. And then it's not like a forced like heavy callback payoff, but it's like a nice payoff where the boss promotes one of his employer, I guess, but like coworker, programmer, for her to become like a co-creative director, and asks her to, well, it's Ian to Pop. Ian asks Pop to carve her name with Ian to commemorate like their start of working together, and then Ian has a knowledge about the old video game company, so he points out like the other carving that was from the old game developer that there was once a company where the two partners, the game kind of failed because the guy didn't listen to his wife, and they weren't listening to each other, and that made the game fall apart. And then he says something along the lines of like, I want to be someone that could listen to you because Poppy has good ideas, and she has been like the backbone of the video game development. So he asks her to carve her name in, and they become co-directors. I thought it was a very nice story flow or whatever. I like that. And then the other thing I enjoyed is also non-sitcom, but it was a backstory of CW. He's the narrative director, who, he always shows this Nebula trophy, like he won an award in like 1970s or something, whatever. And then like throughout the show, he keeps showing off this trophy, and he's carrying it everywhere. But then in the backstory, you find out that he was a fraud. He basically was in like this. He got this editing job with like two other aspiring writers, one Pete and AE or something. I forgot. But the guy was kind of just a shit writer. But the woman was a really good writer. She became like a really big writer. Um, but what CW did, or Carl, what he did was he wrote this whole like little novella, and then because was it AE? I can't remember her name. She already like was gonna have one of her short stories being published by this magazine. Uh, the other two kind of got an in and asked her to turn in their story to have a higher chance of their story being published. And then what happened was she only showed Pete's because CW's one was kind of shit, and it was like the same problem she saw in all the other times she checked through his work. So she didn't show the booklet. But then what CW did was he saw the famous writer, I forgot his name. He saw the famous writer, so he asked the famous writer if you could, have a chance, please read my story. And then later the famous writer saw it and then sent the story back to the address of CW. And then when CW saw it, it was all in red. So on one hand, it meant that the story was shit, but then what CW did was copy the edits exactly so that it became really good writing, but not his writing, but the writing of the famous writer. And then he published it, and then he became famous and get the Nebula Award. So the accomplishment was complete fraud, or it was completely fraudulent. Um, and then there was another episode where it follows that, where it's present day, where he meets Pete after like 40 years, and then they have this like whole fight because Pete published 19 books, and then he also took the girl CW was in love with, and all that, and they both thought they were gonna have an apology. They both thought the other was gonna apologize to them. But the meeting was orchestrated by Pete's daughter to hopefully have a closure for the two guys, but they fight and all that. And and then CW finds out that Pete was only able to publish the books because the wife was the good writer, and she in the publishing team just allowed the husband of that good writer to publish as well. So once she passed away, Anne was the name. Once Anne passed away, Pete couldn't publish the last story. And then CW finds out. He's like, "Booyah! I knew you sucked as a writer or something." And then they fight and bicker, but CW gets too drunk. He just stays. He ends up being taken back by. I guess something happens, and then basically he ends up staying at Pete's house, this mansion. And then later Pete apologizes, and they like what CW said was mean, but it was true. Pete's not a popular writer. No one wants to read. But then it turns out the CW actually enjoyed Pete's writing, and at the end, Pete, and then the whole important aspect of the narrative was that Pete was actually dying as well. So this whole thing that Pete's life was kind of a fraud as well. That his writing wasn't that good, but then it turns out he always had a fan who was his old friend. So at the end, Pete CW asks Pete to read the story for him, and they read the story while looking at this field of the farm of this fruit that Anne used to like and whatever. Um, yeah, I thought that was a very nice, beautiful story. Yeah, and then there was a whole thing in the previous episode, the backstory where CW like goes in despair, like, oh, my story's shit, but then he sees Pong and then realizes, oh, in the future video games are gonna be more advanced to the point that you could actually have proper narrative, proper stories in video games, and he thought that would be the future, but they laughed at him and all that. But at the end of the episode, it's kind of a flash forward into another aspect of backstory where Ian and Poppy was searching for a narrative like director, and they meet CW and they ask, "Are you interested in writing a story for a video game?" And he's like, "Ah," and he smiles and the episode ends. I thought that was very nice too. Um, so I really really like that part. Although I'm watching the show for the value that sitcom brings in, but I guess I'm a sucker for good backstories. Damn it. And um, emotional aspects of story that, sitcom is not supposed to be too heavy on, because it's comfort. And I think that's a good segue into my last point about Mythic Quest, is that season 3, the thing is, it just feels off. There's not even that many episodes. And I think the issue is that it doesn't really have that gut punch anymore. Although, to be honest, the punches were kind of weak to begin with. But then, like, those backstory stuff, that narrative choice gives you a little bit of punch. I like it. But I'm not really looking for something big. It's comfort, and Mythic Quest gives that. But then, and the thing is, I still enjoy it. It's comfort. It has the value I'm looking for in a sitcom, but at the same time, with season 3, I just feel it to be lacking stakes and seems a bit directionless. Or there is a direction, but it's one direction that's like stretched out over 7 episodes that goes nowhere, which is Ian and Poppy starting up a new game and leaving the company, but they just live downstairs of the old gaming company, which in terms of sitcom like character interaction, it works really well. And I guess that's an interesting way to develop characters breaking away, because that happens. Like in The Office, for example, Jim leaves, and that creates stakes, because it exacerbates the fact that Jim and Pam Pam did have feelings for each other, and they kind of want to be with each other again, but now they're away, and it makes sense for Jim to leave because he wouldn't be able to take anymore after being rejected, or after seeing Pam marry. But then Pam didn't marry, and there's like a little twist there too. And then the stake continues because once they're back together, the thing is, Jim is now with Anne, and um, Jim and Pam never click until the end of the season when they used to be best friends. So there's that stake when the characters separate. Here there isn't really a stake. Every time the soy boss, I forgot, was it David or something? The soy boss kind of kicks it into Ian for like being a better boss, but it doesn't really matter. They're still friends. And they keep just visiting each other's office. It's really weird. And then Ian becomes a complete side character with no storyline. He, and I felt like it was, Grim Pop. I thought it was Ian and Poppy working together, but it's just Poppy coding. And then the code was completely useless because the game is boring, which is fine, right? And then it was just some other game that she made on the side just to keep her like new employee who was just a tester from the old gaming company to be busy on. But at the end, that game kind of works and shit's fine. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's weird. It's like, what the hell is Ian doing? And even the actor, his acting kind of fell off, or like the acting is like he doesn't care anymore, but also the character doesn't care anymore. Like also the issue is he accomplished everything, and I get that now Poppy wants to be where Ian stands. Ian is or was, but then it's this this little side game that she thinks is gonna become big, but that doesn't have the the grandiose of what Ian accomplished. It's like grandiosity. I don't know. It just off, But the fact that that succeeds also removes the stakes. There's just no stakes. Like the characters don't really care. Well, the one of the episodes I really enjoyed was Joe's, the gay character, and Poppy. Like again, the gay character, I can't remember her name. I really like her character, but I can't remember her name because it's such a basic ass name. And it took me a while to remember Dana. That's the girlfriend of the, well, I mean they're both gay. The girlfriend of the gay character. But yeah, it's just like the naming. Whoever named the characters is really bad. They're very considering the fact that the characters are memorable, but I can't remember the names. I think goes to show that the naming is really bad, because all the characters are rememberable. All the main characters are memorable. So yeah. Yeah, or most characters. But that character, Joe and Poppy, and Joe is an interesting character who's It's like a little crazy, but they go on like a friendly brunch together and they discuss their problems, but Joe's not really used to that. So, it's kind of off, and Joe's like, I think brunch is not that good, and I realize you two have problems, but I'm gonna help you, kind of cleanse it, give you a cathartic experience by going to a shooting or, what was it, crushing range, where the crushing is actually going on a tank and crushing cars. So they go there and they have like a fun experience, and I thought that was fun. Um, which is steak less, but it works out. I like it. I mean, the thing is, I don't mind steaklessness as well, because I enjoy slice of life stuff like in anime. And I mean, that's kind of what I was going for. But, like, I don't know, like, Arrested Development, it's steakless too, sort of, with like really good humor and the fact that the family is able to stay rich throughout all these issues. But then there's also, stakes. Because the characters are bad, Pop Pop, George is a complete coward that keeps running away, lying, and that gets everyone else in trouble. And then everyone else is like self-deluded or like selfish, and it's like this whole clash of so many stakes. But at the same time, it's a very calming show. Also, the narrator, I think, helps it lessen the stakes, or the sense of stakes, I would say. And just that, yeah, season 3. Also, the set design, of season 3 of the new company. I get that it's on brand with Ian and the character to choose like some weird futuristic, like completely white design where you can't see where the doors are or the buttons. But that makes the whole thing too bland. Like there's nothing. Especially adding to the point that the whole video game like coding scene that spans for like 3 episodes for Poppy ends up turning into nothing. So it adds on to this like nothingness of that season. It just feels so empty. And I think that room of just complete white adds on to that emptiness. But I can't say I hate that season because I still enjoyed it. I couldn't wait until I could click the next episode. And that could also just be that I've already have investment towards these characters and these stories, so I want to see where it goes. It could also just be that, but yeah, it just feels and 7 episodes each season. The episodes get less, which works well for me if I want to binge it one day. But I don't know. But I'm excited for season 4, which apparently is coming out later this year when I should be graduated already, have a job, which is kind of wild. So yeah. What I really also like about that um um the show is they don't shy away from like gray hair, like young people with gray hair, because I mean it's really hard to see with this camera, but I actually have quite a bit of gray hair, and I don't know, it felt, I guess, kind of empowering that young people with gray hair are just shown so casually. And I thought that was pretty cool. Like Poppy has the gray hair she has is kind of like mine, where it's like strips, you know. And then the was this? I feel like she's Sarah, but I'm not sure if she's Sarah. But the gay character, like she has a lot of gray hair, and she's like super young. And it's like, pretty cool. But she rocks it, which is nice. And Poppy, she is the type of character. I really like Poppy because, I don't know, she takes care of her hair as much as I do. I think that's one thing. Um, it's like a dorky character, but not like dorky quiet. She's very overt and actually like kind of dominant, which is an interesting mix of like dorky but like um, has that leadership energy. Um, but it's really interesting. I enjoyed that character a lot. Yeah. And then I liked Ian, but then the last season, like, he's not doing anything at all. But then that could be a good, like, story. You know, that could be a good plot to drive to make Ian do something, but Ian's is completely content with it. Even though the season before, he was talking about how he's scared that Poppy's gonna, you know, get better than him or outgrow him or something. And they have this weird exchange where Ian's like, no, fuck you, you're not gonna be, you're nothing without me, which was kind of a really interesting way to end that interaction and end the episode there. But then that also gets kind of resolved when he fakes a heart attack, but he just fainted from low blood sugar. It just sometimes the resolution of certain plots are too easy. I think that also adds on to the stakelessness. And it's a lot to think about. But then I really, I guess I am I mean, backstories are always, you know, it's a, I mean, it's probably not easy to just write a good backstory, but it seems like an easy way to, you know, bring back or, you know, pull in the audience's attention, investment. But the last episode, the third season, was a backstory of Ian and Poppy. It was really interesting. Finding out that Ian was at one point actually a professor giving a lecture, and Poppy was a student. And then Poppy found out about Ian when she was a child, and she went to a library and then she found this random video game that Ian made, probably the first video game Ian made, which is emotionally tied to Ian and his single mom's relationship that was rocky, but not between them, but she was just not a good mother because she was probably depressed or on drugs or something. But it's emotionally tied, and I thought it was a very nice backstory. Like, when I really look at it, it's kind of cheap. Like a single mom who can't take care, but loves and, you know, says to Iron like, you're gonna do great, and then there's that father that takes away the son, and that father is kind of bad. He tells the ex-father-in-law to shut up and all that. And the son is like, oh, I don't want to leave my mom, you know. It's like too much of a cliche, but it works. And then Poppy has a mom that wants her to do piano, but has a dad that, you know, doesn't once you know, tells Poppy, like child Poppy, to do the piano too, but he also kind of likes video games, so when the mom's not looking, they do video games together. Like, yeah, that's a cliche. It's a they're both cliches, but they're well written enough, I guess. But then I don't. I mean, I need to see season 4 to see the payoff of that backstory, I guess. Because the season ends with a backstory. So it's kind of confusing. Um, Especially after the previous episode that kind of resolved anything when not much was there to resolve in the first place, by having like a nice Christmas party. Oh, and then I didn't get the Danny Pudi's arc. I can't remember the character's name. David? Darren? Some D name. He Joe was his assistant, but Joe was hungry to be like assistant for someone who's more powerful, like, minions. Um, but then she gets swindled by Danny Pudi's character's brother, and she ends up without knowing, doing insider trading. But then Danny Pudi takes the fall and says he did the insider trading and turns himself in. I guess if he confesses, they don't check who actually did the insider trading. I'm not sure. But then he's released. He comes back as a janitor. But that whole thing was never addressed, even though he took the fall for Joe. And like nothing is addressed about the repercussions of that, even if it's not necessarily bad, between Danny and Joe, or Danny Pudi and Joe. That's weird. And then Danny Pudi was, I don't know what the fuck that character's doing. I mean, I guess he was finding ways to manipulate people into getting back his job when he couldn't, because he has like a felon charge now. So works as janitor, but manipulates his way into becoming an assistant of the head of monetization, which was his previous job. But then until then, that position was vacant, which is, I thought, absurd. Or maybe monetization is not necessarily like the major aspect, because it's monetization means more micro transaction. Although, isn't that also a major source of revenue for video games? I don't know. Maybe I'm going too much into the technicality of the story, but it just seems like I don't know, it just seems like they didn't really try. Like, they were really satisfied with CW's backstory, or maybe season 2 was supposed to be the end, but they were like, you know what, let's do season 3. And they didn't have too much idea, which is really ironic considering the fact that season 2 they have an episode on like, oh, we couldn't find any idea for a new expansion because the video game is it's done. Oh, and then one last thing I wanted to address was that's also really weird plot line, considering Danny and Poppy finally becomes a co-creative director, but they never make an expansion together. When she becomes a co-director, that's when they argue and stuff, which is good, but nothing gets developed, and they realize, oh, the game doesn't need any more expansion. So there wasn't that much value in Poppy becoming a director other than Poppy and Danny, not Danny, Ian arguing. And I guess they became closer friends. It's just, I mean, but to be fair, that was passed on to the new video game company where they're working together, but then now Ian doesn't work at all. His character is completely directionless. Which is fine for side characters, but he was a main character. And I've never seen that main of a character become a side character, and it just makes me feel really weird. I don't know. I mean, I would assume it's intentional, but it's like seeing Michael Scott become Creed. It's I don't know. It's just, the thing is, I enjoyed it, but sometimes I think the writing is really bad, or directing, or I never really get. I mean, I know the difference between directing and writing, but at the same time, I don't want to. If I want to make something, I would definitely be a writer and director. I wouldn't be either or, unless I'm writing something for something else. But I would never want to be a director only. That seems like a boring job. That's like head chef, right? You just look at people cooking and you don't do anything. You just okay, whatever. That seems like a boring job. Or it's the same with like research papers. Like when I was doing an internship, the overseeing the doctor, I guess, he wasn't doing anything. He was just in his office all the time. The actual people in the lab were, doing the lab work. But he just oversaw. He didn't do anything. I don't like that stuff. Maybe when you're like 70, 60 something, maybe it's cool. Like you've accomplished everything, but you kind of still want money and you still want to be part of the sphere and still want to have your name on something. Directing and just being head of lab will be cool, but when I want to do something, which is interesting. I think there was a lot of actually very inspirational, motivating scenes or conversations that characters did have in Mythic Quest, which I like. It's just it's an absurd show, because the thing is, I still enjoyed it even though I know it's not that good of a writing. Maybe that's how people who watch Modern Family feel. Yeah. Maybe it's also the fact that I just watched Arrested Development, which, like, that show doesn't work if the writers and directors don't think, I feel like Mythic Quest, they're not thinking it. That kind of works. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like the last season of The Office or the fourth season of Community. They're not really. Well, fourth season of The Office was more like they were trying too hard, I would say. So yeah. I mean, it's all my opinion. How did I not get that mosquito? Well, that's how I felt. And once again, an hour. I thought this was gonna be 20 minutes, but yeah. I guess one last thing. It's kind of cool. I don't know, maybe this is a common thing, but some recruiter messaged me on LinkedIn. I completely ignored her, but then she sent me a follow up today, like asking me again. The job is in Amsterdam, and it's not really bio related, so I don't really think I'm interested. But then I'm thinking about like I am, I know I'm gonna struggle to find a job, and that what's happening right now is a job is given to me on a silver platter. Um, but but then that means I gotta live in Amsterdam. The cost of living is high, so I'm probably not gonna be very good at saving money anyways. I gotta move, and I really don't want to move. Um, I want to stay here for the next at least a year or two. It's gonna be hard, but I know my university's holding. Actually, you should be holding seminars for job search, which is when. I do not put in the schedule. I'll put in the schedule later. Yeah. So hopefully, I'm gonna take 3 months to find a good job, and hopefully I can do that. Yeah. Um, that's it. Mythic Quest. Reconsidering it, I think it's 6.5. Even though I liked it, I binge watched everything. It just there's no gut punch for the most part. The third episode I really liked. I mean, if you really think about it, there's nothing new about that story as well. Um, when you break it down, but then most stories you break it down, there's not a lot of. But then, nah, Arrested Development, there is something new. That's a good story. Oh, they have a lot of good stories. I mean, yeah, yeah. When I'm comparing it to Arrested Development and then look at Mythic Quest, I think it's very clear that Mythic Quest, this when you look at the stories, it's very uninspiring. It's way too much overdone plot and cliches. Um, I guess there's some unique aspect. I think the whole setting is unique because it's a gaming company, a sitcom in a gaming company, which is fascinating. And the characters are interesting for the most part. I think Poppy is definitely a inspiring character. And the actor's great. I think I just like Australian accent as well. I've never really watched a show with a character with an Australian accent. It works really well with her character as well. So yeah. And especially with the backstory, CW is a really interesting character. And I mean Danny Pudi, he seems like a good character. Like his scheming. Well, I think it's like up until season 2, his scheming makes sense because the schemes actually don't end up with anything. It ends up helping people. But then the whole point is that Danny Pudi's character is actually compassionate more than he wants to admit, and he just schemes to help people. Um, But then season 3, he actually schemes to get a job back, but the scheming doesn't seem like he had any control over it. It was all coincidence. So, I don't know, just lazy writing, maybe. Who am I to say I'm the laziest, not producing anything, um, not doing anything at all. I talked about like the structuralist series that I was gonna do. I posted like 2 videos, and I have like 5 videos on my phone. I didn't even bother posting it. But like the structuralist series is just like, it's like the whole point is that it's shit. I'm just trying to put something out there, but it's just shit. I don't want to continue that because I don't know. It's procrastinating. It's procrastinating, and I don't know. My thesis. My biggest issue is I think my topic is bad because this is just about aging. But yeah. Oh shit. That was a mosquito. I don't know. Yeah. Well, hopefully tomorrow I actually start studying for exams and stuff. Well, that's it. Bye.